Hello and welcome to the Modern Homesteading Podcast. We're glad you're joining us today. Today we're going to talk about succession planting because we haven't talked about that. we mention it from time to time, but I don't think we've had an episode on it really. So we're going to talk about that today. But how you doing today, Rachel?
I'm doing pretty good. Things have been a little bit wild. We had a little bit of a family emergency, but things are settled down now and we're back on track trying to catch up all of the garden stuff, like succession planning.
Yeah, I got some of that going on. Yeah. What else? What all you been doing on your homestead besides that?
Well, I've been planting lots of plants. Well, not plants, seeds. I planted a bunch of seeds this morning to replace when it gets hot. My lettuce goes to seed and gets out bitter. And that's one of the ones I probably most commonly do. And then some fall crops. I started those and will be, because fall comes kind of quick around here. I know some of you people in the lower states, you're like fall, but here, September, we can start getting frost. So believe it or not, we're kind of halfway through the growing season here.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
How's the drought treating you up there?
Oh, we got rain, finally, glorious rain. Yes, we got so it's interesting. My rain gauge, I have one. I need to get a second one because it says we got almost 2 inches of rain.
Wow.
And that seems very wrong. Like,
yeah, we got a bunch too.
It seems off.
Yeah.
But we got a lot and we needed it. And I don't have rain barrels, but I did line up a bunch of 5-gallon buckets along our eaves. And I collected a bunch of that. And I've been watering some of the inside plants because you know that rainwater is just, I don't know what it is. It's special.
Yeah. Makes a garden explode. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've saved some of that. And I've been weeding. So the weeds loved the rain too. They loved it.
But they've been doing pretty good even through a drought, at least in my place.
Isn't that crazy? Even
a crazy year for weeds.
Yeah, my worst weeds are probably crabgrass. I think that's the one I probably struggle with.
A lot of grass coming into mine.
And it doesn't matter how horrible it gets out, how dry it gets, that stuff just seems to grow no matter what. Yeah. So
I got a lot of lamb's quarter too popping up everywhere, which I like but it seems like I obviously last year I must have let some go to seed because it's everywhere. I mean, I've got a ton
so that's last night I had a big salad with, I forgot to add lamb's quarter, but I put in nasturtiums for that little bit of spice. Yeah. And then I had purslane. I used a bunch of purslane that I had weeded out of one of the garden beds, and
I've been making some fancy salads out of my garden. I've been doing
yummy.
I've been doing all the different greens, the chard and the kale and the lettuces. And then I've been adding things like the sugar snap peas and slicing up some radishes and putting in there and just a little bit of everything. I've been making some really nice fancy salads.
Yeah. And then this week I've had to move my schedule around a little bit because I was going to do some stuff outside and we've had horrible smoke from the fires from Canada.
Oh, yeah. It's hitting us down here too. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. It was just so hazy. The air quality was really, really bad. And so we didn't do a ton outside the last couple of days, but I had lots of stuff inside to catch up on. And
now I seen you were putting the filters on your fan and your box fans.
Yeah.
Is that working out pretty good?
It did work really well. So we have like air purifiers in our bedroom, but they only do like just the bedrooms. And we were smelling smoke even in the house. So we have 2 box fans and I went and got just some 20 by 20 filters at the local box store.
Furnace filters.
And furnace filters. And I used some bungee cords on those. It is amazing how much it cleared the air up. So we had 2 of those running on high trying to keep the air quality good.
And those look like just regular furnace filters, nothing fancy.
No, they were just cheapy cardboard. Yeah. I think I put 2 on there. So there was the really cheap one that was like $1. And then I had a more expensive one, which still wasn't super expensive. It was like, I think it was on sale, but it was under $5 for both of them. But the first one is just to catch the dog hair.
I bet if a person spent a little bit, it was really sensitive to that and they wanted to spend a little bit more, maybe get a HEPA filter, like one of the HEPA furnace filters, those would probably work really, really well.
Yeah. I had read that. That's our air purifiers that we bought. We bought very nice ones several years ago because we have allergies and asthma and those are HEPA filters with charcoal filter. And then they have blue light that will kill mold.
Oh, wow.
It has this blue light thing in it. But those filters are really expensive.
Yeah. Yeah. But I've
Those
seen
are just for our bedrooms.
We use the ones that are HEPA for our furnace, for the furnace filters. They're, I mean, they're definitely more expensive. They're not crazy, but they're probably 3 or 4 times the cost of the cheaper ones.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think they would
worth it.
work really well though. Yeah. If you were having a big issue. So,
and they were telling people to use their air conditioning, but what happened was the smoke blew in, and we also got the cold air, like the Canadian cold air. So it was only 55 degrees. So
right. Yeah. It was cooler here too.
Yeah. So to use the air conditioner when it was 55 degrees, I suppose we could have turned on the heat, but yeah, we just used those little filters.
Yeah.
It worked pretty good.
Nice. Yeah. I had a busy week around here as well. Last couple of weeks, really. I've been getting really into the compost tea brewing. So, and I've been putting in some water barrels because this drought, if anything, this drought's woke me up to the fact that I never have enough water storage. So I have actually opened up I had a couple of the 275 gallon IBC totes, and I've actually set those down to where they're all catching water off the one end of my barn on a trough. So on the other end of the eave, I set a trash can. I think it's about a 50 gallon. I don't know what the exact gallons is on it. It's taller than a 55 gallon barrel, but it's not quite as big around. So I don't know what the size. I'm thinking around 50 gallons probably. And I'm going to use it to collect rainwater also. But then I also set it up and kind of made a little quick conversion out of it to where I can go back and forth and use it to brew compost tea out of.
Yeah.
So I'll catch rainwater when it's full, and when I'm not using it for a while, I can maybe once a month brew up a big batch of compost tea. And that's enough. I figured out yesterday because I actually did it a couple of days ago, and then it was a perfect amount to cover my whole property. Like I went around and watered my entire property with that compost tea and give it a good drink of it. And that worked out really, really well. So I figured about once a month, I'm going to be doing that through the growing season.
Yeah. I saw pictures of that on
it
was Instagram.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see how this works for you. It sounds.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of them things that's really hard to
measure.
To see. It's really hard to measure. Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, you just have to I think it's just something over time, your soil gets healthier. You probably see a lot less disease issues, stronger plants, things like that. You just notice gradually probably. But yeah, I've been really focusing on that because I just don't produce enough compost, compost.
That's so hard on our properties.
A good way around that is take that compost and make a good compost tea, and then you get a lot more bang for your buck, right? So that's been something I've been really concentrating on lately. And I don't want to bring in outside fertilizers, and I don't really want to be getting into buying compost. I want to make my own. So this is a good option.
This is a great solution for small properties.
Absolutely. And also it was garlic harvesting time. Have you been harvesting any garlic yet?
I pulled one last week and it wasn't quite ready. Yesterday, I went out and dug around the outside edges, trying to peek without disturbing it. I think I'm getting close. Maybe next week.
I started seeing people in my area posting some pictures of their garlic harvest, and I was like, "Oh, it's that time. I guess I better go look." And I pulled a couple out, and I went, "Yep, they're ready." So I went in and harvested all my garlic.
I saw that picture too. Now, you're
I got some hanging in my gazebo out here.
It looks like you're hanging it on like one of those metal shelving.
They are. They're the racks.
I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah, I didn't have any more because I took some fence and I got in my barn. I've got the fence and I've got dropped down to like the 1x2 fence, and I got dropped in there. Well, then I had those it's those white shelves you buy that you can make for they're like for utility rooms or whatever. And I basically just hung those in my gazebo and dropped it through the slots on those and hang it up like that. And it worked really, really well too.
I'm like really thinking to myself, I have some of that.
Yeah. They're sturdy. They're pretty strong. They're heavy duty. So the problem with using fencing is you got to kind of secure it in several places because it'll bow down and bend and stuff's rolling up on you. Those are solid.
And this is like that shelving that you can hang on the wall. Yeah. It's not a shelving unit.
Right. Yeah. It's the stuff you hang. It's just the shelf pieces by themselves, the wire shelving, but they're really heavy duty. And they were great. I just dropped it down through there and they're hanging up and they're kind of up in the ceiling of my gazebo. So they're going to be dry, but they're going to get enough breeze through there to dry out good. And
that's cool. That's a good idea. I like that.
So I'm waiting for those to dry, and then I get to do my braids. I like to braid my garlic.
Yeah, that looks. I didn't. So last year I braided onions, but I didn't braid my garlic. I ended up cutting off my garlic. I had never thought to braid it. So I'm excited to braid mine this year. It just looks so cool.
It's cool just to hang it up, find a place in your kitchen to hang up a braid of garlic.
You feel so homesteady when you do that.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. There are probably even better ways to do it, store it. But you know what?
Probably.
Nothing looks as good as the braid. So we're going with the braid.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's just the whole compost thing that you're doing, the compost tea. I just think it's great for our smaller properties, but I also think it can be done so simply. It sounds way more complicated than it is, but after reading about it and seeing you do it, and because you're doing it, adding way more than I am. So you inspired me to go buy my bubbler, and mine's on my way here.
Yeah.
But it isn't really that complicated. I guess I always thought
I'm definitely add a lot more than just compost. I mean, I'm actually putting worm castings in there. I'm putting some comfrey leaves in there. I'm actually adding some liquid kelp and some fish emulsion and some powdered mycorrhizae inoculant. And I'm actually making a true brew. And then I'm putting that in the property. And it's just, it's kind of, I've been just going through a lot of the teachings I've been reading which we'll get to in a minute, a book that I'll talk about. It's really opened my eyes up to that. And then I've been 2 courses that I've taken have talked a lot about it. Plus I've just been putting a lot of study into the work of Dr. Elaine Ingham and what she's been doing with that. And she's, I mean, this is not just like people think this does good. She gets the microscopes out. She looks at what this is doing. She knows what's in her soil. She knows what is in the tea, what it's producing afterwards. She even looks to see what she needs to be like. There's some different kinds of brew, which I don't want to turn this into a whole podcast on that, but there's some different kinds of brews you would make. So you check your soil, you know that you want more fungal, you need more fungal activity than bacteria activity. So you might make a brew that's more fungal, that's going to feed the fungal instead of the bacteria. Vice versa, you could make one that's more bacterial focused than fungal, or you can make a balanced one with both, which is what I did. So it's just, I mean, there's so much science to it, but you can really create an awesome soil,
And you can just do it. Like, see, I was making anaerobic without the bubbler, and you're getting really into it, and that's really cool. But I also don't want to stop anybody from doing it if they just want to do it simply. I'm just going to toss a bubbler and a bucket with some comfrey, all the things you did.
Yeah.
I might get a microscope.
I was doing it in a 5-gallon bucket. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been doing it with a 5-gallon bucket up till this point, but then I thought, man, this is going to make it perfect. I can do this all at once. And when it was time to spread it, I didn't have to even dump it in buckets. I dropped my sump pump down in there with a garden hose attached to it that was long enough to reach all the way around my property. And I just flipped the pump on and I went around and just sprayed it on everything that I was growing, all the trees, the shrubs, the garden spaces. I mean, I just put it everywhere. And so I just really wanted to inoculate this property with a good compost tea. And I did.
And you have the book that you're going to recommend has recipes in it. So why don't you go into what book you're
let's jump into our books here. The book that I'm recommending today is, and I think I've talked about it online a few times in places, is Teeming with Microbes, The Organic Gardener's Guide to the Soil Food Web. Is it Jeff Lowenfels? I think is how you pronounce his name, and Wayne Lewis are a couple of the authors. It's an awesome book. If you don't have this book on your shelf and you're a gardener, get this book on your shelf and then get it in your hands and then get it in your mind, because there's just so much value.
And that has like the recipes so people can go, okay, how's Harold doing this?
I tell you what I really like about this book is the first half of it pretty much is like a high school biology book. And what I mean is it wants you to understand the reason you're going to do things. It wants to teach you about the things that are in your soil and what they do for your soil and how it produces the micronutrients that feed your plants. And they just make the connections. It really helps you understand the connections. The second half of the book is the practical end of the book, where it tells you how to feed that food soil web, how to make good compost, how to make good compost tea, what you need to add to your soil and what it will do for it. And it's the practicals of it and how to apply it and all the things. And so it's just a great, and it's not a giant book. I mean, it's a couple hundred pages but it's just packed with goodness. It's just a great book. And I've been spending a lot of time in it, reading it. And then on top of these courses and stuff I've been taking, that's just been dumping all this stuff into me. But that's where it really began, was with that book. That book is great. So That's one for the shelf there.
It's the 101.
It's even a little beyond 101, but it's definitely one
I own it, but I don't know.
Basics and beyond. Yeah.
It's been a really long time since I read it. I believe when I read it was probably before I was as into what I am right now.
I've got a bad habit of buying books and then not jumping into them for quite a while. So it's been on my shelf for a while and I haven't really dove into it. And then I got into it. And when I was starting one of these courses, they mention it. Ooh, I should go look at that. And then I'm like, oh, wow. It's like I went down that hole and then it never came out yet.
And now that's what you've done with me is you've gotten me enthusiastic about, that needs to be the next one on my problem is I have so many books.
Yeah, me too.
And I bought several recently and I'm still sifting through that list.
Yeah. I'm trying to spend a lot more time one by one. Yeah.
And that's why I like living in an area where I have 4 seasons because I can take my book time in more in the winter.
Yeah. Speaking of 4 seasons.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's
your book recommendation.
Good little segue there. So my book for this week is 4 Season Harvest by Elliot Coleman. And I own several of Elliot's books, but this one has to be one of my favorites. I have read this and actually underlined and highlighted in this book. I just love it. And it's perfect for today's topic with succession planting. And
that's my favorite of his books also.
Yeah.
It's really good.
And he actually has a good YouTube channel too, but he grows year round in basically the same climate that we're in.
He's quite closer to your climate than mine.
He's zone 5. And when I say year round, he's not growing tomatoes.
He's growing something though. Yeah.
He's growing something though. Like usually like radishes or greens, especially in the winter. Yeah. But he kind of is the master of having something in the ground all the time.
Season extension. He's very good at it. He's got a lot of methods and he talks a little about how he does it and he works. That's stuff that really is applicable and it works to grow stuff year round.
It is a really good book. If you don't have the finances to buy one, almost all I've seen it in so many libraries. Our library has
It's been out for a while. I don't know when that book came out, but it's been out for quite some time. And it's a great book. Yeah. It's
been out for a while. I want to say he's got a couple other ones too on Market Gardening. The first one that came out was in 1992.
Okay. So it's been out for that. This is a sign you're old when you hear 1992 and it doesn't seem like it's that long ago, but then you start doing the math and you're like, whoa, that's a long time ago.
Yeah. That's like 31 years ago. And I'm like, man, really?
Yeah. Seems like it wasn't just that. Yeah. Just a few years ago, 1992.
And what's interesting is a book that you have recommended before, which was the Nearing's book. Oh, shoot. What's the title?
The Good Life.
The Good Life. Yeah. The Nearings were one of his neighbors.
Yeah.
And the Nearings mention him in his book. So there was a lot of really cool stuff going on in that area of the country where they were living. So yeah. So that's my pick for this week.
Two great books that folks should have on their shelf that will help you be a better gardener. Both of them books are just full of just great stuff that will help you grow a better garden for sure. So
and Elliot did all sorts of crazy stuff. Like they would go to the coast and get seaweed and clam shells and put them in their garden.
Yep.
So just really that closed loop system. And then like you were talking, he was just feeding the soil.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what it takes. And Elliot is definitely a master of succession planting, which we're going to talk about today. Market gardeners in general, that's what they do.
Yes. Yep.
I mean, that's what market gardeners do. You're succession planting. There are a few different things people mean when they say succession planting, and I've used it that way too. I think of different things when I talk about succession planting. The most common thing that I succession plant when I'm thinking of succession planting that comes to my mind is my lettuce.
Yeah.
How I grow lettuce. Because I stagger the planting of my lettuce. I have a bed of lettuce and I grow a row here. And then 2 weeks later, I plant a row here and then I plant another row. And I have like 3 rows going in this little 4x8 bed. Right. And then I will harvest off this row for like 2 weeks. And then this one, and then so then it's done. And then I replant that row and I start on the next row harvesting from it. And then by the time I get to that third one, that one's ready to start harvesting from again. And I just got this constant rotation. Yeah. And that works really good, especially with lettuce all summer, because what happens when you leave lettuce too long in the ground in the hot weather, it bolts and it gets bitter and you can't eat it. So you constantly have pretty fresh lettuce. And sometimes I even have to pick, if it's really, really hot and really, really dry, I might have to pick up the pace and go every week and pick it even younger because it's bolting within 2 weeks. So I might have to even do it
summer.
quicker.
That's what yeah.
And
you can do that with all of your greens, and then you can in the shoulder times.
Mm-hmm.
You can do some of the colder greens like kales that like it more, but that's very similar to what I do, especially with lettuce, just because, like you said, with summer, if you want to eat lettuce every day, you kind of have to do. And
it's kind of the one that I'm most commonly doing that method with. Now, there's also another method of succession planting that what I'm kind of dealing with right now. I just emptied out 2 whole beds when I harvested my garlic, and then I got one where I harvested my radishes. They're actually sitting out there empty right now. I got to put something in those. I don't have to, but if I'm going to succession plant, I want to, right? Because I want to keep more crops coming in. I don't want to waste that space. I want to use that and grow something else. And there's plenty of crops you can plant and got plenty of time to grow again and get another harvest out of it. Maybe even a couple crops, depending on what you grow. I mean, I could put radishes in there right now and in 30 days harvest those and then do it again with radish. You could actually do the same crop over and over and over if you wanted to do that. Or you can grow different things, which is probably what I'll do. I'll probably get another thing of cabbage going, probably get some more broccoli and cauliflower going. Yeah. I mean, I love my brassicas.
Cabbage this morning was part of my push. Yeah.
I'm probably just about 3 or 4 weeks away from harvesting the cabbage that I've got in the ground right now. So I'd like to have some for the fall. So yeah, there's that kind of succession planting. There's actually a couple other kind of succession plantings also. There's actually taking the same kind of crop, but different varieties and planting them in a bed together because your different varieties might mature at different times.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of succession planting too.
Yeah, because
harvest, it can be say harvesting a tomato or an early potato or something like that and have them planted kind of in a row next to each other. So you're going to harvest off this row now because this one's going to be ready, say 20 or 30 days before this one's going to be ready. And then this one pops up that you can get a lot of the same food throughout the whole growing season. Right. But it's similar. It's a little bit different variety, but something similar.
Yeah. And so when you buy your seeds or your plants, it will say on there how many days to maturity. And it is amazing how just like cabbage can have this wide range of how long it takes for them to go from seed to maturity.
Yeah.
I have a couple of different cabbages. No, I think I have 3 different kinds of cabbages. And I chose those, one of them because it's good for fresh, another one that is because it's good to store.
Yeah.
And another one because it's really good for kraut. And they all have different maturity rates.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that's a good way to keep that coming, but not have to plant something different in that bed. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's how, for people that are new to this, that's how you would do that. And is you would look in the book when you're ordering your seeds and stuff, it will tell you the maturity dates till maturity, because some of these plants, it's just a really wide range for even corn or corn is one that a lot of people do because because they want to do the same thing. So maybe you don't can and you just want it fresh all the time. You just want that fresh sweet corn. And so people will plant several rows of corn, and then they'll plant it again so they can have it ripe all summer long.
I did that last year. I had like 3 different varieties out there, and they all 3 came in at different times. Yeah.
So you can have corn. You can have corn in July, and then you can have it in August, and then you can have a little bit in September, and then maybe you can have a dried corn if you wanted to make some corn flour, whatever. But that's kind of why people do this. And because when you have small properties like we do,
well, we'll get into the benefits of it here in a minute, but there is actually one other thing that sometimes people mean when they say succession planting, which I would actually call it intercropping, not succession planting.
Okay.
But a lot of people will use it in that term that way. And that's planting 2 completely different kinds of things in a bed. And then one of them will mature, and then you can harvest it before the other one really starts taking off and taking it over.
Yes.
I did that this year with my squash. I have some yellow squash and zucchini in the same bed, but then I planted radish between them. Of course, the radish was ready. I've already picked it, and now the squash leaves are completely taken over, covered up the entire bed. So I got the radish out of there before that happened. And it was a type of succession planting, but it was intercropping. Now, intercropping can play some different benefits. It can be just for harvest times, but it can also be for beneficial things like insect control. You can plant trap crops, or just things that might to draw in beneficial insects. There's things that you might plant that will be for suppressing disease or things like that. I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons you would interplant.
Yeah.
But yeah, that it's some people would call that.
I did that with garlic and carrots. So by the time my carrots start to get big enough for me to have to worry about the garlic, I'm going to be pulling garlic here in the next week. And then those carrots can take over that bed. But I did it for the fact that the deer don't like the garlic, and the deer have been coming in and decimating my carrots.
Great
and
idea.
The bunnies.
Yeah.
And the bunnies. So
don't get me started on a bunny. I had one out
here. But they haven't touched my carrots this year. And I think it's because I planted them with that garlic. So hopefully once the garlic is gone, I don't have issues, but we'll see.
Yeah. I think the last time you and I talked, I think I mentioned something about a rabbit, but I was like, he's overeating my chard. I got so much chard out of here, all the chard he wants. Well, about half of my pepper plants got bit in half by this rabbit, and now I'm not so happy. I was okay with it when he was eating my chard, but now he's ruined my pepper plants, and now we got problems. So that might be a problem that has to get dealt with. We won't get into that on this episode.
I got deer fence up.
Yeah,
because of the deer, but it's not great at keeping out rabbits. It's really hard to keep out rabbits. It really is.
Something. He ruined about half my pepper crop, it looks like. So now I'm going to have an issue with him. Couldn't just be satisfied with the kale and the chard. He had to go for the peppers.
You just got the little Peter Rabbit in your garden there.
Yeah, he's tearing it up. So anyway, back to things. Well, generally though, what we're going to refer to, I think, in this podcast, when we're talking about succession planting, is the two kinds where you remove everything in a bed, plant something new, or plant the same thing or plant something different, or the row by row and rotation of succession that way. So those are generally what I refer to when I'm talking about succession.
Same with me. The last one, like you were saying, I consider that intercropping.
Yeah, intercropping. And then the one with maturity dates, I do that, but I don't know why. I guess I don't really think about that as a succession plan, but it is. I mean, I guess I just don't think about it. I don't practice that much because generally I don't plant too many different varieties together of the same thing. But I could, and it is a way that you could do succession planting, and it does make sense because you're getting that stuff at different times. So I can definitely see that being referred to as a succession planting as well. Do you have trouble saying the word succession over and over and over?
Yeah, it's a hard word to say. Like, am I saying it right? Succession.
I keep saying it over and over, and it's like I keep feeling like I'm messing it up. Anyway, well, let's talk about the importance and benefits of succession planting in the garden. You mentioned one a minute ago, and I said we'll get into that in a second.
It's so productive.
It is,
especially when you're on the small plots.
It's the market garden method, right? You rip it out, replant, rip it out, replant. It's just over and over and over. It's high production, and we like it.
Well, and the other thing I like about it is we spend a lot of time trying to make our soil amazing to feed us. Mm-hmm. And if you're using smaller gardens, it's way easier to build that really good soil. But if you are spread out over several acres or a couple of acres even, it's harder to do that. So if you do this method and you use this succession planting, you can have smaller beds and produce just a lot of food still.
Yeah.
So for me,
there are some challenges that come with that. We'll talk about later. Yes. I don't want to talk about them right now. There's some things you have to pay attention to when you're doing that. But yeah, it does maximize your garden productivity for sure. I mean, you're going to get. I've been doing it since the beginning. I mean, when I first put in my first raised bed, I mean, I started just keeping it loaded all the time with seeds, or even quicker. You can just have constant. Plants you could have seedlings going in there constantly and get a quicker return. But yeah, you can get a lot of production out of you take one 4x8 bed and it's amazing the amount of food you can get out of it by doing succession planting.
Yeah. And I mean, and there's things that you can add to it, but we can talk about that later too.
Yeah, for sure. Something else reason I think succession planting is really good is it covers the soil constantly.
Yeah. Which is huge.
We hate bare soil, hate it. It's not good for your soil. It's not good for the life in your soil. It's not good for the texture of your soil. And it's not good for a lot of reasons. It's going to dry out your soil when it's bare. It's going to not retain moisture as well, which is good for the life in the soil. So if you can just keep things growing in there, and you know what? And if you don't plant something in there, Mother Nature will. Weeds are going to start coming up.
Yep.
So I think it's great for protecting soil as well. Planning, though, for succession planting can be a little bit of a challenge because you do have to think ahead. Like I said, I got 2 beds out here empty right now. Now I've got to put something else in there. What have I planned for? What one of them I know what I'm going to put in there. The other one, I'm like, I didn't plan that one out. So I do have to think about what I'm going to put in there. So there are things you have to consider: your climate, your growing season. How long is it going to take the next thing to grow? Like you mentioned earlier, you got to pay attention to those days to harvest. What you're going to see on all the seed packets is days to harvest. Some things as low as 30 days, some things 120 days. I mean, it's all over the place, and it's different varieties of different kinds of things. So you have to figure out when's my first frost date likely to happen. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not going to be planting watermelon or tomatoes right now.
But you can plant some squash. You can plant some beans. You can plant some radish. You can plant a lot of leafy greens. You can plant, there's a lot you can succession plant that grows pretty quick.
Yeah.
For sure.
Even,
And a lot of root vegetables, beets, turnips, radishes, all these things grow pretty fast, 30 to 60 days on some of these things.
New potatoes even. I might not get full-size potatoes, but I could get new potatoes if I
and there's some different varieties there that will grow quicker, early potatoes and things. Yeah. So there's things you can do. You have to just do some homework there and try to understand your climate, your seasons. And then you also have to consider, are you able to extend that season? Can you put down row cover and make it longer and even get another, maybe a third season out of it, depending on where you live?
Yep.
It's like, for me, it's like I used row cover in early spring to start early. And then if you can use some row cover to go late, you can get 3-4 plantings out of some beds.
Yeah, you can extend it. I mean, it's quite possible, especially, I mean, Elliot Coleman does this masterfully, but it's quite possible, even in a small garden without a greenhouse, with just row covers, that you could get 3 to 4 weeks on each side of your season.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah. And in the right crops. I mean, I'm not going to be growing tomatoes out in my garden.
You could start with spinach early spring, get you a spinach crop,
kales and radishes. Easy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then you could end it with kale, which will go right into snow and then be picking it. You can end with something like that.
I mean, it overwinters even here.
Yeah, it does here too.
I have kale in my garden from last year, and I'm zone 5. So
it sure can. So you can go right into that. I'm gonna have to kick the snow off of stuff and eat it, pick it, and eat it. Chard is like that too. I mean, my chard's like bulletproof too. I'm knocked snow off it and ate it. Now, if it we had that really hard freeze this last winter.
Oh yeah, that's nothing.
I did have some kale survive it.
Did you really?
It killed the chard though, dead. I mean, it was brown.
Yeah, and I mean, you add those things and you start thinking about feeding yourself, or even growing some greens, extra greens if you have layered chickens or rabbits or anything. I mean, you think about extending the season like that, and how much healthy food you're providing for yourself. Yeah. It's pretty amazing. It's worth the investment. I have some row cover. It's probably, if you take decent care of it, now, yes, it does get ripped and stuff on and off, but I think I have some that's 3 or 4 years old that's still good.
Yeah, I don't cut any holes in mine. I just I use the hoops, and then I set rocks around it and stuff instead of poking holes through it. I had a couple of mine get tore just with use, but I mean, they last quite a long time. I usually try to keep good care of them, but I use little wire hoops so they're not sharp. But the only time I ever tear mine is, it seems like they'll catch on the corner. If I have some raised beds, and I'll use it on the raised beds also. And sometimes it catches on the corners of the raised beds when I'm moving it, and that'll rip it. When I use them out in the in-ground garden, that stuff seems to hold up really good.
But I just love it. I'm using it right now on my cabbage beds, my brassicas, because I was having problems with pests. So I just couldn't keep the flies and moths and stuff out of there.
Yeah, those cabbage moths are horrible.
So it has multiple uses. It does. Yeah, we kind of moved into that, didn't we?
That's fine.
Yeah, it does come in different
weights.
What do I want to say?
They call it different weights.
I guess weights. Yeah. So there's thinner. If like right now I'm using thinner because I'm only using it for pest. Mm-hmm. But in the shoulder seasons, when I say shoulder seasons, I mean like your spring and your fall. When you're worried about frost, you're going to want to get the the heavier.
I kind of use a middle of the road one, and I just use it all season, and it doesn't seem to cook anything. Which I only put it on my brassicas, and it actually seems like it shades those pretty good. I've never had
I
it.
feel like it does too.
Yeah, I've never really had.
And what weight are you using?
It's the middle one. I can't really remember.
Yeah, mine is a
remember
name
the
brand.
thickness
I'm
of
using,
it, but I'll put a link to it in the show notes. The one I use, and that's the one I use kind of all year. Now, if you were down south, you really couldn't use it. I'm sure it would cook your stuff.
Yeah,
you could probably use it early spring and late.
I mean, and we could even talk about that, like shade cloth. I do have some shade cloth that once in a while I'll put over my lettuces, and it comes in different widths. If you have bigger hoops, my hoops are pretty small. I probably need to get bigger hoops because I'm trying my secondhand year at Brussels sprouts. And so my hoops are going to be too small.
those take some time to grow, and you're up in Michigan, so it probably does.
Yeah, I started pushing the limits long time ago. Yeah. But those are, mine is 5 foot wide. You can get it much wider, much wider. Just depends on the size of your hoops. And you can make hoops. I mean, I've seen people make them out of.
So there are some things you're going to have to plan for when you're succession planting. So you're going to have to consider when to start things out there, when to get your first thing going. You're going to have to look at your days to maturity, your harvest times. You're going to have to look at if you're able to extend the season on both ends. You're going to have to look at something we'll get into later, which is soil depletions and how to take care of that. You're going to have to look into the layout itself, like where I put my lettuce or some other leafy greens. I'm taking advantage of microclimates. So some other things may not do good in that microclimate if I go to plant it there in a succession. So you have to plant things that will grow good in the area also of where you're planting that. So the space you're growing is something else you have to consider. So often when we start putting our garden plans at the beginning of the year in, we're just thinking about this initial planting.
Yeah.
But we really ought to include a continued year-long succession planting as part of that plan. When that comes out, what's going in? Am I going to have it ready to go in as seedlings? Am I going to direct sow it as seed? How quick is it going to grow? Am I going to have to consider doing something with the soil in between those times? I mean, there's just a lot to consider. It's a little bit more to the planning, but the production that you're going to get out of your garden is going to be so much greater that it's worth doing. It absolutely is worth doing.
Yeah. And a book we've talked about before, Jesse Frost addresses this a lot in his book and in
all the market gardening books do.
Yeah, the market gardening books, they really address the soil fertility and keeping the soil well fed. So they will pull a crop and then they will feed and then put the plants back in or put seeds back in. But that is how these guys do this on a small, because some of these guys are doing this. Some of these guys are doing spin farming and they're doing it in several different lots, and then they take it to market, and that's how they keep all of that coming all summer long.
And you're growing something that doesn't take a lot of, like say lettuce doesn't take a lot. I mean, I don't even do anything other than I'm spraying my compost tea or adding a little compost occasionally to it. Mostly I'm just spraying my compost tea on it.
They're not heavy feeders.
They're not heavy feeders. They're not going to deplete the soil. If you got something pretty heavy feeder, your brassicas are pretty heavy feeders.
Yeah,
you're probably going to have to dump something on that soil, feed that soil pretty good before you plant the next thing in there. Especially if you're going to plant another row of, now if you're going to plant, say, lettuce in there as a secondary crop, you probably not. But if you're going to replant brassicas, you're going to have to feed that soil in between plantings. So it is the things like that you have to consider.
Yeah, I would say lettuce is the easiest one to do this with, and it's probably the most common for the home gardener, just to keep that salad coming all summer long.
Sure. Yeah. But you also have to think about things like crop rotations too, because some things invite pests and disease, things like that. So you might want to not put the same thing back in that bed, move it to another location and practice crop rotations on things that are prone to disease and pests. I take squash, for example. You get your squash bugs and things. One of the best things you can do to reduce the level of squash bugs you get is to get it in a different location, because they lay their eggs in the soil, or they lay eggs on leaves, or then those live bugs, though, they get down in the soil and they hibernate, where they're going to come back up right there. If them leaves are right back there for them to hit again, it's there. They're going to hit them.
Yeah. And you just want that confusion for the bugs.
Move it to a completely different location on your property, not even a different bed, but just a whole nother location. So it's something else to consider in your succession planting, because that is one of the things I succession plant is my squashes. I mean, I'm going to have an early like yellow squash and zucchini, and then I'm going to go to a more like a butternut or something like that for a later fall harvest. So I'm just constantly rotating my squash around, putting something different in there. And some things are more prone to the bugs and the diseases and your powdered mildew and things like that. So if you're just
that's
kind of
what I have had issues with the powdered mildew. And that is one of the issues when you plant as intensively as we do because it is easier to
airflow.
We don't get the airflow. Yeah. And in small areas, it's easy to get an infestation because you have such a small area. But, that comes back to what you're talking about with feeding the soil and the microbes, and that will help combat that. But and that's where I'm going to be planting my cabbage again. I'm not so much doing it because of disease. I'm planting in a different bed because they are heavy feeders.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to plant in the lettuce bed that I just had because lettuce don't feed heavily. Right. So I'm just rotating that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then there's some things that, like I said, they're going to deplete the soil so heavily, but a lot of those things you won't crop rotate anyway. Not in that way, because they're going to take the whole season to grow, like tomatoes and peppers and eggplant and things like okra. And I mean, these heavier feeder things, they're going to stay there all season anyway, but there can still be some crop rotation happening because while they're young and they're not producing anything, you can have something in between them that's producing, like I do with my squash or like I do with my tomatoes. I mean, I plant carrots in between my tomatoes and things like that. So you're going to get those early. You get them out of the way by the time the bushes start thickening up, and now you're going to get your tomatoes. So even with those crops, you got to be careful not to plant anything with them that's also going to deplete the soil. You want things that are in there that, like carrots, don't require tons of nutrients to grow. They'll do well feeding with tomatoes. But also, when you're feeding your tomatoes, the extra nutrition isn't going to hurt them either, because there are some things that don't like to be fed. So you have to be careful about that. So you don't want to put something with your tomatoes that if you're dumping a bunch of compost and compost tea on, that it's going to just like not produce good for you because it can't handle that much nutrient, because there are plants like that.
I kept killing my lavender because I had put it in my garden where the soil is amazing. And at least in my experience, lavender just likes drier soil that's more sandy. I put it up by the road where it's totally neglected and the road salt and everything gets on it.
That might be a good podcast to do one day. Maybe we just cover all the herbs and vegetables that like bad soil.
Yeah.
For those people who don't have great soil. Yeah.
It went from like this little tiny plant that I started to this huge bush up by the road where it's totally neglected, but I killed 3 of them trying to plant them in my garden.
There are several plants like that. They seem to do better when they're neglected and don't have great soil. They don't want you dumping any compost on them. They don't want you watering as regular as you do everything else. They just like, leave me alone. I'll survive. And they do a better job of it. So there's plants like that, but you want to be careful not to put that into something that you're feeding heavily or that you're, you just got to think about what you're going to be doing to the soil too. These are just all things to consider. And they're not most things. If you just look up good companion plants for this, you're going to figure out the things that are going to do well with that. Yeah.
You don't have to overanalyze this to the point where you get analysis paralysis. Just start small and start experimenting with it so you can grow more in your little space.
One thing I really like about succession planting is that it reduces my overwhelm. Because I'm telling you, when you get everything in your garden all at once, and now you have to do something with all that. You have to can it or dry it, preserve it in some way, or just put it up. It's like, wow. When it's all at once, you feel that. You feel that. And I love it that I can get all season long. I'm just getting it in chunks, and then I deal with it as I get it. I can some now and can some later, and dry some now and dry some later. And that is it just reduces the overwhelm. And that's part of the plan too. It's like, I want that because I don't do well with overwhelm. I like to plan it out to where I can do things in chunks, because I don't have the time to just put days and days into food preservation. I need to do it a little bit at a time. I
don't either. As much as I love it and I do it a lot, I try to spread it out as much as I can. I mean, we were talking about that earlier before we even started the podcast today was how I had like 2 whole days where I didn't have anything that I had to do other than be here and garden and work on the homestead.
It's a rare
And we were
thing.
talking about how it will wear you out. We don't even have, I mean, I have my acreage, which I work at on the weekends, but even here on this little small third of an acre, I could be doing something all day long, every day. It will wear you out.
I love the entire growing season, but I will say every fall, I do get a little burned out because I want to spend my time out in the garden, not in the kitchen, preserving things, chopping stuff up. It's just preparing everything to be canned and everything. It's just like when you get too much of it at once, it just feels like it's all you do for days. And I just don't enjoy that at all. Now I enjoy it later in the winter time when I'm opening up a big jar or something and eating it. Yeah. I love having it. So I'm glad I do it, but you can definitely reduce that if you can do a little bit throughout the summer as well. You can knock some of that off, takes a little bit of that edge off and make it more doable. And succession planning definitely contributes to that. It just makes it a better way. And there's just some things that you don't preserve that you eat. But through succession planning, you can eat them all season long, because if you just plant them once, they go fast, they're done. If you didn't succession plant lettuce, you're eating lettuce for 30 days maybe, and then you're not going to eat it the rest of the year. I mean, you got to do that. Radish. I love chopping up radishes and putting them in things. I like you ever make hash brown radishes?
I have. They're good.
Really good. Yeah. It takes that taste, that stinginess goes out of them completely. And I think they're better than like a potato hash brown. Really good.
I've made potato salad with radishes instead of potatoes. Yeah.
It's great. Yeah. I love anything. There's all kinds of stuff you can just do with your radishes. It's just awesome. So I'm getting to where I used to just I'd plant a bunch of radish, get them. It's like the first thing you're harvesting out of your garden every year, right? Because they grow so fast. And I'd harvest them and I'd be done with them. Well, then I figured out all these great ways to eat them, and now I want them all year.
I need to get better at growing radishes. I have not been.
That's right. You have a little bit of trouble with it, don't you? Yeah.
Successful with radishes.
They grow here. Why. Like I have to be careful when I'm messing around with the seeds, because I sprinkle the seeds and I'll kind of just sprinkle them around, and then they end up everywhere, and I got them popping up in the pathways and everything else because they grow so fast and so easy here. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things I want all year. So succession planning makes it available for me to have without the whole growing season. And I don't just get this one time eating it and then it's done. And squashes and everything. Beans are a thing like that too. It's like, like yesterday, I just picked a whole bunch of sugar snap peas. Well, now those might be a little more difficult to grow in the heat of summer, but then I can start another crop of those in the fall.
I was just going to mention peas, because there's your food that just does not like the heat.
They don't like the heat, so I got to think about in the
summer and in the falls. And pea,
and you might have to do some microclimate, especially in the fall. You might have to consider some beds and kind of create a little microclimate bed for them for the fall, because even in fall it can be a little hot for them. But yeah, I mean, it's just something I like to grow and I love them. I mean, they're one of my favorite things to eat like that. But so there's just a lot of different things that you can do it with.
Yep.
What you got to do. This is where seed catalogs are your friend.
Yes. And I will say there's a couple of seed catalogs that are much better about the information they give you. And I mean, you put the link.
Johnny Seeds
better ones
has one of the best catalogs, but their website is amazing. Yeah.
And their catalog has so much information in it. It's a whole education just in their catalog. I'm
including a link to, they have a section on succession planning, but you go to that one section, then down below, there's a bunch of links for more stuff about succession planning. And in there, they have a downloadable Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah.
That you put your last average frost date at the top, and then it automatically fills out all these dates of when these maturity dates, and when you can replant other things with them. It's amazing.
Yeah. So if this all sounded overwhelming, go to that and
chart.
It will make you a chart, and
it'll
tell you exactly what to do.
Yeah. And you can put in the stuff you like, and they have a bunch already pre-filled out in there, but you can even add other things and put the days of maturity on them, and they will it just fills out automatically for you. And it's amazing. So it's a perfect tool for succession planting. So get that.
They have a very good website, and their catalog is equally good. I mean, their catalog gives you, I don't have one right here. I should have grabbed it, but it tells you the days to maturity and what each plant, like there's specific breeds of tomatoes that are better for drying or better for canning or better for paste. It tells you that about every vegetable.
And they're honest about it too. It will tell you when there's something it is not good for. which is what I love
Right.
too. Like
Yep.
it'll say this is not ideal for whatever climate or not ideal
Exactly.
for just different things. It will actually good and bad. Yeah.
Yeah.
So which is
And then on
important.
top of it, they have all of the stuff we were talking about with being able to extend it on top
Yep.
of it. That,
Yeah.
I believe there where I got my hoop, I got wire hoops instead of the, what do you call them? The poles that are a little bit bigger around. Mine are just skinny wires.
Mine are fiberglass. The ones I use.
Oh,
Yeah.
fiberglass. Okay. I did try PVC, but they did rot pretty quickly. Right. In a couple of years, they rotted and broke. So
These ones I use are made out of fiberglass. I mean,
Yeah.
they probably might even wire in them, but they seem like they're holding up pretty good.
Yeah.
I think if they were out directly, you got to think they have the road cover over the top of them, so they get a little less sun probably beating down on them. So they seem to hold up pretty good. But
they have everything there, like that you would need for. And on mine, I just use clothespins, but you can buy hoops that have special clips.
I don't put anything on them. I just have enough extra that lays over on the ground that I just lay bricks and rocks and things on it, and it holds it down. The bad thing is that you got to go around and remove all of those when it's time to slide it over.
That's why I use the clothespins, and we get a lot of wind. We get wind that tunnels up the side where I have my row covers this year, so I used the just clothespins.
Yeah,
from the dollar store.
Ways to put it down. So yeah, I mean, you're going to find that if you don't have to do that. There are plenty of things you could grow to where you don't have to get into season extension. That it depends on where you live. I guess if you live in Alaska, you're probably going to have to use season extension, and you may not even be able to hardly succession plant too many things. If you live where I live, there's 100 things you can do it with. I mean, there's just tons, and then a little bit of season extension, and you might even get multiple seasons, more than 2 or 3 even out of some things. And like I could probably grow radish about 5 times. I could grow lettuce. I mean, I can just keep going with it. So, I mean, there's just several things you can do. So,
well, and we could probably grow kale year round if we really, really were determined to.
Yeah, that's something else I wanted to mention too. We were talking about a lot of people will take a lot of leafy greens, especially, and you can extend it by just like say harvesting the outer leaves and letting it grow and keep doing that. Well, the problem is that lettuce starts getting bitter. The quality starts just deteriorating on it pretty fast when you're just taking cuttings or you're just cutting it and letting it grow back or whatever. And you can definitely get more from it that way, but it's a lot more work because now you're having to go out there and be nitpicky, about what you're picking off of it. It's so much quicker to go out there for me to just go down there and cut like 5 or 6 plants, throw the entire thing in a bowl, take it in, clean it, eat off of it. 2 or 3 days later, I do the same thing. I ended up taking a row out in about 2 weeks. I took out a whole row.
Yeah. I used to feel bad about wasting plants by doing that, cutting them down because they got bitter. But now I realize I'm feeding my compost.
Yeah, I put in the compost.
Chickens or whatever.
Yeah, I would rather have that fresh stuff. I mean, I have to get a little bit of seed. Yeah. But then I actually have an area where I have some lettuce growing that I let go to seed every year. And I get all the seed I need every year for free. Your seed. And I save my seeds. So I have tons of lettuce seed. I don't ever buy lettuce seed. I have tons of it. And I just keep that going. So I always have 1 or 2 plants that you let go to seed is all the seed you're going to need for the season. I guarantee you there's tons. Those little pods put off so much seed. It's unreal. And radish is the same way. Radish is one of the easiest things to get seed from. I mean, it produces 1 or 2 plants. 1 or 2 plants will produce all the seed you need for a season easily. And
that's how I have not done it with radish or with lettuce, but I have done it with several of my herbs like cilantro and parsley. I mean, I have not bought seeds or dill years.
You definitely want to stay on top of it. You want to get to it before it lets go on its own, though.
Yeah.
Especially with radish, because I find that radish going everywhere.
Well, that's what cilantro will do here.
Yeah.
My word. You will have it everywhere.
So I kind of dedicated a couple plants in an area so I can really pay attention to it and know when it's ready to harvest. Because like I said, if I get sidetracked for a week or 2 and next thing I know, all the seeds are gone on their own. They're just planting away. And then I have it, like I said, in my paths. I mean, it'll grow in gravel. I had radish growing up in gravel pathways.
See, I can grow it, but it always gets a bug in it. I think it might be whitefly.
Really?
Maybe. I'm not sure.
It? What kind of bug you think it is?
Maybe it's whitefly. I don't know.
Okay.
It tunnels through it.
Oh, interesting.
whatever it is tunnels through it, or I let it go too long and it gets woody. I think that's what means I let it go
Yeah,
too long.
I tend to grow more at a time than I should because I don't eat it fast enough, and then I get a bunch of it that ends up going woody, and then so I'm planting new, and then I'm throwing that in the compost pile.
Maybe I just need to be better about harvesting it because I think it's just a tiny baby still, but it's not. It's
Yeah, I need to plant it in more like intervals and plant less of it for sure because I tend to not eat it fast enough. I should just
plant it right next to my lettuces and.
Because just a few of them will go a long way, dish or whatever. I mean, I just generally I put it in salads. Unless you're making things like hash browns or something out of it, you want tons of it because you could just drop tons of them in a and shred it.
And they're low carb, which is nice. Yeah. I was going to try my hand at fermenting some.
Yeah, I've done the seed pods. Those are really good.
Fermented them?
Yep, very good. You ever eat the radish seed pods?
I haven't.
They're fantastic. It's my favorite part of the radish.
Okay, then.
It's my favorite part. I love the seed pods.
This morning, I probably planted a few hundred seeds, but I did not plant any radishes. I think I'm going to go out and start some radish seeds.
Yeah, let a few go. Let a few go to seed. And when the seed pods are really young and they're really tender, pick a bunch of those and eat them. And it's like you get that mild radish taste and a crunch that's just great. They're fantastic. Amazing. And then you can ferment them or pickle them or however you want to do it. People just pickle them even, and they're fantastic. Yeah. Somebody even turned me on to radish leaf pesto.
I have made carrot leaf pesto, but
radish leaf pesto gives you that little bit of a radish tang in a pesto, which is fantastic. Yummy. And I just tried that this year for the first time, and that was really good. So yeah,
I think,
we're going to turn this into a radish pesto.
Yeah, podcast. We are going to turn it into a radish. So I have one of the things that I planted, I start planting like my tea gardens too. So I do those in succession because one of my favorite is Tulsi. Yeah. I think I'm saying that right, which is a basil. And basil,
that's a basil. Okay.
Basil is it doesn't last very long. Right. Once it goes to seed pretty quickly. And so I plant several every couple of weeks. I plant those. So I have tea
really? Okay.
I love it. I love it. It's a different flavor and I like it. And I add that to rose petals.
I tend to grow it more as a companion plant than I do for the use because I don't use a lot of basil. But it's a fantastic companion plant for like pest control and things like that and things like that. So I plant a lot of it for that. And it looks nice and it grows really good too.
Tulsi basil doesn't taste a lot like your cumin.
See, I don't know. Yeah. Like there's a couple of kinds of standard basils it's okay. I'm not a huge fan. What was it somebody told me about?
I'm growing 3 different kinds. I'm growing the Tulsi, the purple, and the
somebody told me like about a chocolate mint basil or something. Yeah. And they were telling me about some different kinds of basil. And I was like, man, I might have to try some of that. That sounds interesting.
Do you ever do the basil leaf with the mozzarella and then the sliced tomatoes and then you drizzle it with olive oil and put it in the oven?
No, but you talked me into it.
Oh, it is good. It is really,
that sounds really good. Could be because I'm hungry.
Every year when the tomatoes and the basil is ripe at the same time, we're like, yes.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good.
I've tried that. Yeah, that does sound good.
I'm sure there's a name for it because I think there is a name for what that's called, but it's just sliced fresh tomato with some basil and mozzarella, a little bit of salt and some olive oil.
Sounds delicious. I mean, I like all those things, so it sounds great.
It's to die for. It's really good.
Well, see, folks, benefits to succession planting, the culinary benefits. You'll get this stuff all throughout the year. You can keep trying it, try new things with fresh. Because there's a lot of things you cook in dishes fresh that you can't grab the preserved stuff to do it with. You need it fresh. Yeah. Now, how you keep fresh is keep planting it, keep it growing. So I will definitely want to turn you on to Johnny Seed for all their great information. I want to tell you pretty much any book that we've discussed in the past that has to do anything with market gardening is going to have great advice for crop rotation, for feeding the soil, for just maintaining it and harvesting it on a regular succession basis like that. So any of those books are going to be great for you. Elliot Coleman, you mentioned.
Jesse Frost
book. That's a great, the Living Soil Handbook's what that's called.
And then there's
that's a great
John Fortier. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. I mean, there's just all of those market gardeners. They have great YouTube channels that'll probably have some information on there too.
Yeah, great stuff. So, yeah, that's what I would say. If you want more information on succession planting, the word's getting harder as I go.
Too many times.
Yeah, look to those sources. We'll put some links in the show notes for a few of those options. And yeah, check out the books we recommended today. And you have anything else, Rachel?
I think that's it.
Well, we appreciate you folks joining us this week. And until next time, happy homesteading. God bless.
And grow where you're planted.
Looking around, I finally see I think I need a change. The rat race I wanna flee, my world I'll rearrange. I'm getting back to the roots of how it's meant to be. Growing gardens, picking fruit, racing livestock, living free. It's a modern homestead. Build a modern homestead. A lot of folks don't understand why I wanna live this way. They've never eaten from their land like we do here every day. Snapping beans like Grandma did, sitting on her front porch. Hunting and fishing like a kid once you've done all of your chores. It's a modern homestead. Build a modern homestead. Country or city, there's a way